Done, Prabhuji.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisheshanavadi Ashatadi Shatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. We welcome everyone for today morning reading on a very auspicious occasion of Gudi Padwa, which is also in Sanskrit known as Yugadi. Yuga Adi, the beginning of Yuga, like that. It's also considered when Lord Ram was, he was crowned as a prince, the king, I should rather say, of Ayodhya. An auspicious day. This is also marks a day of New Year in some of our traditions. So on this auspicious day, we are reading from 14th chapter, verse number 26. Now here the discussion which is going on is about the questions that Arjuna had asked in the 21st verse, and that was three questions were asked. The symptoms of one who is transcendental to these modes, what is his behavior, and how does he transcend the modes of nature? So the 26th verse answers, how does one transcend the modes of nature? Mamachaya avyavicharena bhakti yogena sevate saguna samatiyetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Translation purport by Srila Prabhupada. One who engages in full devotion service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Purports. Would anyone like to read the purports? Can raise their hand. Let's begin with Krishna Chandra Prabhu. Go ahead.
This verse is a reply to Arjuna's third question. What is the means of attaining to the transcendental position? As explained before, the material world is acting under the spell of the modes of material nature. One should not be disturbed by the activities of the modes of nature. Instead of putting his consciousness into such activities, he may transfer his consciousness to Krishna activities. Krishna activities are known as Bhakti Yoga, always acting for Krishna. This includes not only Krishna, but his different plenary expansion, such as Rama and Narayana. He has innumerable expansions. One who is engaged in the service of any of the forms of Krishna or his plenary expansions is considered to be transcendentally situated. One should also note that all the forms of Krishna are fully transcendental, blissful, full of knowledge, and eternal. Such personalities of Godhead are omnipotent and omniscient, and they possess all transcendental qualities. So if one engages himself in the service of Krishna or his plenary expansions with unfailing determination, although these modes of material nature are very difficult to overcome, one can overcome them easily. This has already been explained in the 7th chapter. One who surrenders onto Krishna at once surmounts the influence of the modes of material nature. To be in Krishna consciousness or in devotional service means to acquire equality with Krishna. The Lord says that his nature is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge, and the living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme, as gold particles are part of a gold mine. Thus, the living entity in his spiritual position is as good as gold, as good as Krishna in quality. The difference of individuality continues, otherwise there would be no question of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means that the Lord is there, the devotee is there, and the activity of exchange of love between the Lord and the devotee is there. Therefore, the individuality of two persons is present in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the individual person otherwise there would be no meaning to Bhakti Yoga. If one is not situated in the same transcendental position with the Lord, one cannot serve the Supreme Lord. To be a personal assistant to a king, one must acquire the qualifications. Thus, the qualification is to become Brahman, or freed from material contamination. It is said in the Vedic literature, Brahmaiva san Brahmapi eti. One can attain the Supreme Brahman by becoming Brahman. This means that one can attain Supreme Brahman by becoming Brahman. This means that one must qualitatively become one with Brahman. By attainment of Brahman, one does not lose his eternal Brahman identity as an individual soul. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. We have discussed about this before, so I'm not adding anything over here. We'll continue. Next verse, 27th verse, the last verse of this chapter. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amratasya avayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukasaikantikasya cha. Translation: Brahmano hi pratishtaham, which means of the impersonal Brahma Jyoti, Krishna says, I am the basis. Amratasya avayasya cha, which is immortal, avayasya, imperishable, shashvat, eternal, dharmasya, the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. I am the basis of impersonal Brahman. What are the qualities of that? Immortal, imperishable, eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness, like that. Purports. Somebody would like to read next. Madam Medhavni, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu Dandat Pranam. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The constitution of Brahman is immortality, imperishability, eternity, and happiness. Brahman is the beginning of transcendental realization. Paramatma, the super soul, is the middle, the second stage in transcendental realization. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate realization of the absolute truth. Therefore, both Paramatma and the impersonal Brahman are within the Supreme Person. It is explained in the 7th chapter that material nature is the manifestation of the inferior energy of the Supreme Lord. The Lord impregnates the inferior material nature with fragments of the superior nature, and that is the spiritual touch in the material nature. When a living entity conditioned by this material nature begins the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, he elevates himself from the position of material existence and gradually rises up to the Brahman conception of the Supreme. This attainment of the Brahman conception of life is the first stage in self-realization. At this stage, the Brahman realized person is transcendental to the material position, but he is not actually perfect in Brahman realization. If he wants, he can continue to stay in the Brahman position and then gradually rise up to Paramatma realization and then to the realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are many examples of this in Vedic literature. The 4 Kumaras were situated first in the impersonal Brahman conception of truth, but then they gradually rose to the platform of devotional service. One who cannot elevate himself beyond the impersonal conception of Brahman runs the risk of falling down. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that although a person may rise to the stage of impersonal Brahman, without going further, with no information of the Supreme Person, his intelligence is not perfectly clear. Therefore, in spite of being raised to the Brahman platform, there is the chance of falling down if one is not engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. In the Vedic language, it is also said Raso visaha rasam hi evayam labdva nandi bhavati. When one understands the personality of Godhead, the reservoir of pleasure, Krishna, he actually becomes transcendently blissful. Taittiriya Upanishad 2.7.1. The Supreme Lord is full in 6 opulences, and when a devotee approaches him, there is an exchange of these 6 opulences. The servant of the king enjoys on an almost equal level with the king. And so, eternal happiness, imperishable happiness, and eternal life accompany devotional service. Therefore, realization of Brahman or eternity or imperishability is included in devotional service. This is already possessed by a person who is engaged in devotional service.
Hare Krishna. So, as a little bit purpose, in the first part of the paragraph, Prabhupada is establishing the qualities of Brahman and comparing it with the one who is already taken to the path of bhakti. He has already attained the state of Brahman. And then the purport continues. We can have another devotee now take to the reading. Who else would like to read? Ravi Bhatka Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The living entity, although Brahman by nature, has a desire to lord it over the material world, and due to this, he falls down. In his constitutional position, a living entity is above the 3 modes of material nature, but association with material nature entangles him in the different modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Due to the association of these 3 modes, his desire to dominate the material world is there. By engagement in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, he is immediately situated in the transcendental position, and his unlawful desire to control material nature is removed. Therefore, the process of devotional service, beginning with hearing, chanting, remembering the prescribed 9 methods for realizing devotional service, should be practiced in the association of devotees. Gradually, by such association, by the influence of the spiritual master, one's material desire to dominate is removed, and one becomes firmly situated in the Lord's transcendental loving service. This method is prescribed from the 22nd to the last verse of this chapter. Devotional service to the Lord is very simple. One should always engage in the service of the Lord, should eat the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the deity, smell the flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, see the places where the Lord had his transcendental pastimes, read of the different activities of the Lord, his reciprocation of love with his devotees, chant always the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and observe the fasting days commemorating the appearances and disappearances of the Lord and his devotees. By following such a process, one becomes completely detached from all material activities. One who can thus situate himself in the Brahmajyoti or the different varieties of the Brahman conception is equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in quality. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 14th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of the 3 modes of material nature. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we'll continue our discussion to chapter 15. Maybe I can just quickly summarize in what this 14th chapter talked about. So 14th chapter just introduced the concept of modes of material nature. I should not say introduce, the concept had been introduced by Lord Shri Krishna before, but actually discussed or provided some details. What is this modes of material nature? What are the qualities of the modes of material nature? What is the destination of an individual who is situated in different modes after death? Where do they go? What are their lifestyle, etc. In general, the main thing that was particularly highlighted here during this chapter was that whatever, anything and everything living entity does is conditioned by the modes of material nature. And we understood the mode of ignorance is entirely opposite of mode of goodness. Mode of ignorance is a darkness and distress, whereas mode of goodness is of enlightenment, knowledge, and happiness, contentment, like that. Whereas mode of passion is between mode of goodness and ignorance, where a person is quite agitated and he's filled with desires. Things like that were discussed. And finally, Arjuna asked, my dear Lord, how do we transcend? What are the symptoms of a person who has been situated in mode of goodness, and how do we transcend this modes of material nature? Like that, the chapter talked about it. Now, discussion of modes of material nature will continue ahead in 17th and 18th chapter also. Here, again, you can see in the context of the last 6 chapters, the subject of modes of material nature is just briefly discussed. More details will be shared later on. Let's go to the 15th chapter now, where the title is The Yoga of the Supreme Person, which is also known as Purushottama Yoga. Yoga. Text number 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. So, what is this? Okay, let's take a look at the verses only, then we'll talk about it. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Udvamulam madha shakam ashvatham prahuravayam chandamsi yasya parnani yastam vedasa vedavet. Maybe I can just give you a quick introduction of this chapter. So this chapter, like in the 8th chapter, Lord Shri Krishna had briefly discussed about the material world versus spiritual world. Similarly, in this chapter, Lord Shri Krishna will build up on that theme. And this chapter begins with where Lord Shri Krishna is speaking about the spiritual or the material world. How material world is nothing but the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. That's the thing has been discussed. And then Lord Shri Krishna talks about that how he is the maintainer of all living entities. He is the maintainer of the external body, he is the maintainer of the subtle body, he is the maintainer of the soul and everything. Like that, this chapter, the discussion goes on. Short chapter, but a very, very important chapter. What has been discussed in the 8th chapter like that is summarized here once again, and some more concepts are added here. Let's see, where is our screen? And yeah. So, Urdhva Moolam, which means Moola means root, Urdhva means upward, Adaha Shakam, Shaka means branches, Adha means downwards. Ashwatha means banyan tree, Prahur, Avvayam, Avvayam means imperishable, Prahur means is said. There is said to be a tree, a banyan tree, which has its root upwards, Urdhva Moolam, Adha Shaka, branches downwards. And Chandamsi Yasya Paranani, Paranani means the leaves. The Vedic hymns are said to be its leaves. Yastam Vedasa Vedavet. One who knows this tree knows the complete Vedic knowledge. Translation. It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree. The Supreme Personality of Godhead speaks. It is said there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is a knower of the Vedas. Good, Prabhupada. All right, Mother Priyanka, go ahead.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. After the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, one may question, what about the Vedas? It is explained in this chapter that the purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna. Therefore, one is in Krishna consciousness who is engaged in devotional service already knows the Vedas. The entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end. And for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's root grows upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. This process of extrication should be understood. In the previous chapter, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from the material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded with so many branches representing the various planetary system. The fruits represent the results of the living entities' activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation.
Hare
Now,
Krishna. Very beautiful point. Very profound point Prabhupada writes here. The root of this material existence grows upward. Prabhupada says this means that it begins from the total material substance from the topmost planet of the universe. In other words, the root being upward, which means the origin of this material world is in the spiritual world. That's from where the creation has happened. And as we know, when we read from the third canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, the second canto, etc., from Pradhan comes Mahatattva. And this all thing is happening outside of the material creation. It's part of the spiritual world. And from there, the material world comes into existence. So the root grows upwards. Prabhupada is making a point that actually it is from the spiritual world, this material world has manifested. That's the point here, because the root has to be in the ground. So what is the ground of it? What is the basis of this material world? The basis of the material world is spiritual world. And therefore, when we read the Chatushloki Srimad Bhagavatam, Aham evasam evagre, that famous verse of Lord speaking to Brahma, as well as same is spoken to Daksha also in the sixth canto. The Lord says, Hey Brahma, I alone existed before creation, I exist during the creation, and I exist after the creation. Which means so Krishna is not alone. Where does Krishna is? Krishna is in the spiritual world. Which means Krishna in the spiritual world always been existing. Material world sprouts at particular time and particular location of the spiritual world, as we know of that. So that's the point is mentioned here. Nicely presented by Prabhupada. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance. All right, we can another devotee read now. Madandu Radhika, go ahead.
Now there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upward, but there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly. Analytical study. This can be, thus, then he can cut off his relationship with it.
Hare Krishna. Again, Prabhupada, it's a beautiful point. The reflection is generally situated on water, right? In case you're looking at the reflection of a tree in the near the bank of a river, that's where you can actually see it. You can see it on the land also, but generally let's talk about the water. So just like a reflection of the tree is situated on a water, and this material world is nothing but a reflection, but a reflection of the spiritual world. So the question arises, where is the reflection of this material world situated on? And Prabhupada says, the reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire. Because we have had the desire to enjoy independently of the Lord, this material creation came into existence. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. Now, if you want to wind up and go back to our original home, then what needs to change? Our desires. Therefore, as long as we continue to maintain material desires, the material creation will continue to exist. As long as we continue to have material desires, we will continue to remain in the material world. That's the point which I get it here. Beautiful point. I really liked it. What's the reflection on what the reflection this tree has is situated on? The reflection of is situated on desire, like that. Mother, continue.
This tree being the reflection of the real tree is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree, and from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti, Purusha, then the three gunas, then the 5 gross elements, Pancha Mahabhuta, then the 10 senses, Dashendriya, mind, etc. In this way, they divide up the whole material world into 24 elements. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees, and the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. The material world is a perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself. And that is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of Godhead himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world.
Hare Krishna. Text number 2. Adhachodvam prashurastasya shakha guna prabadha vishaya pravalaha adhascha mulani anushantatani karmarubandhini manushaloke. Translation: the branches of this tree extend downwards and upwards, nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Interesting. But Nikhil Prabhu, go ahead, read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
The description of the banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches spread in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of living entities, human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, cats, etc. These are situated on the lower parts of the branches, whereas on the upper parts are higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas, and many other higher species of life. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. Sometimes we find that a tract of land is barren for want of sufficient water, and sometimes a tract is very green. Similarly, where particular modes of material nature are proportionately greater in quantity, the different species of life are manifested accordingly. The twigs of the tree are considered to be the sense objects. By development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses. And by the senses, we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. The tips of the branches are the senses, the ear, nose, eyes, etc., which are attached to the enjoyment of different sense objects. The twigs are sound, form, touch, and so on, the sense objects. The subsidiary roots are attachments and aversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. The tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. The real root is from Brahmalok, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma or fruitive activities for promotion. This planet of human beings is considered the field of activities. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, Lord Shri Krishna have introduced an interesting concept of how this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, and it's like a tree. So how to cut the roots of this tree is the subject matter of the rest of the chapter that we shall continue to discuss from tomorrow. So it's around 7:10 or 7:12. We'll pause here today for today, and maybe till the time I'm in temple, we'll have it for until 7:10 because I have to go for another activity now. All right, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So if I'm correct, we have discussed until 15th chapter, verse number 2. We'll continue from 15.3 tomorrow. Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Hare Krishna.